Okay, so I've put the SNS reference file in the chat. You can download it and open it, and we can start. So, but before you open it, let's open our project folder. Remember how you open your project folder, you select file, you select open folder, then go to the location of your project folder. I'll select my Terraform project, click that, double click it. Then in here, I'll select my Flickr project and select folder. So I've opened my project folder. I'm going to close this and this for now. So remember, you should see everything here, all the files we've created so far. And up here, you'll see your folder name. So once you've done that, the next thing we are going to do is open the reference file. So this is the reference file for an SNS topic. It is very simple. It's only 13 lines. We are going to, the first syntax is we are going to create an SNS topic, which is just this. And the second syntax is we are going to subscribe to that SNS topic. So we need this SNS topic because remember, when we create our auto-scaling group, and our auto-scaling group will send message to us about the auto-scaling group's activity. So we use this an SNS topic. And if you remember when we're doing our project, we were selecting SNS topic, then we'll select the topic we use to subscribe to it. So that's the first thing we are going to do. Just a second. All right, so let's start. So once you've opened your reference file, so right click in here and let's create a file in our project folder for our SNS topic. So remember to create a file. There are several ways you can create a file. If you click this here, that will create a file for you in here, or you can right click, select new file. Let's call this sns.tf and just click out or press enter. So that should open your sns.tf file. The next thing is come to that reference file, copy everything. I'm just going to copy everything and paste it in here. Then we can remove this because we don't need that reference file anymore. The first thing we are going to do is create an SNS topic. That is the first syntax. So in Google, if you want to search for that syntax, this is how you search for it. And you don't even have to use the syntax that I'm using. You can, you don't have to use the syntax I'm using. You can just be as descriptive as what you are trying to create. So in Google, I can just type Terraform, AWS, SNS. SNS topic. So once I select that, there's usually always the first one. So if you open it, you can see this is it right here. And this is pretty much the same as that. So if you compare this to that, it is the same thing. So, which is why I was saying any resource you want to create, just Google Terraform, AWS, and the name of the resource. So it should come up. So if you just join in, we just started. So the only thing you have to do now is open your project folder, create a new file in your project folder called sns.tf. Then I placed the SNS reference file in the chat, download it, and just paste it in here. So that's what we've done so far. So place whatever is in the sns.tf file, reference file, put it in your SNS file that you created. So that's that. So that's where you get the syntax. The next thing we need to do is for our SNS, all we need to do is give it a name. That's the argument. We have the name. So that is just any name you want to call your SNS topic. So I can call it user update. You can call it anything you want. I'll call it user. Should I call it update? I'll call it update topics. Update topics. So that's how you create an SNS topic. Similarly, if you go into the management console, if I search for SNS, simple notification, I'll select that one. On that topic, create a topic. You can pick what type of topic you want. And you can see the only thing we specify here is just the name, the type, and the name. So it's actually a little bit much complicated to create it in the management console versus creating it in Terraform. So pretty much when you are creating it in Terraform, for now, all you need to do is specify the name. But there are also a lot of other arguments down here that you can use. But the name is good. We just want the name. The next thing we are going to create is, once we create our SNS topic, remember we have to subscribe to that topic, meaning that we create the topic, then you have to put an email address for we have to put an email address in that topic. So that is whatever email address we put in there, that is how we are going to get alert on. So this is how we subscribe to a topic. Remember, to subscribe to an SNS topic, again, just type the name as descriptive as what you are trying to do. So here I have Terraform AWS SNS topic subscription. Or if you type Terraform AWS subscribe to a topic, it would give you the same results. So for this syntax, you can see the resource type. Terraform provides this, and this is the local name. I created this. Just like this here, I created this too. So then the first thing we need to do is add an argument for topic ARN. So for topic ARN, this is which SNS topic are you trying to subscribe to? Well, the SNS topic we are trying to subscribe to is the one we just created up here. So for this, all we have to do, the same thing you've been doing, copy the resource type and the local name. Come down here, paste it there. Remove the double quotes, add a period. And remember, the attribute you are trying to reference is the ARN. So here, we'll type dot and we type ARN. And that's all we need to do to create that. The protocol, meaning that how do you want to be notified, there are different ways to be notified when SNS is sending you the notification. For us, we want to use email. So in here, in double quote, type email. And the last one is the endpoint. The endpoint is which email address do you want to be notified on? We can type our email address here and it would work, but just like we've been doing, let's create a variable for it to continue learning about variables. I had in a perfect example was one of my colleague that I used to work with. He called me today and was asking me, they gave me some values and they wanted me to enter it in this Terraform file. How do what does this, I don't understand what this variable means and where they want me to enter this stuff. So when I was looking at this code, it is exactly what you guys are doing now. So the reason why I keep pressing just understanding what variable means is because you are definitely going to use it at work. Because at work, they will probably have one file that they use for all the VPCs. So you're not going to have like 20 different files for 20 different VPCs. And how they are able to differentiate between all the VPC is the variables. So, so we are going to create a variable for this endpoint. So we'll come to our variable file. You can copy any of this variable. The format for your variable, they are always the same. So copy any of this variable, right? Come down here and paste it here. So once you've pasted, we are going to modify the values of the variable. So for the variable name, we can call it SNS email or something. So let's give it a name. So endpoint email, we can call it endpoint email, right? Then for the default value, right? The default value, remember what we put on the default value. The default value is the value that when Terraform reference our variable, when Terraform is referencing our endpoint email variable, the default value, it is what is going to use. So here is where we are going to type the email address we want to use. So here you type your email address in double quotes. And on that description, so if you just join in, what we've done so far is create a file that is called Terraform, not Terraform, create a file that is called sns.tf. Then in the chat, I put the reference file for the SNS reference file, download it and put the syntax in your SNS.tf file that you create. Then this is what we've done so far. So for the endpoint, we are creating a variable for it. So in our variable file, I just copied this down here and I'm creating a variable for it. So on that description, we are just going to call it, description can be anything you want, but remember description is when you look at it, you understand what the variable is used for. So I can just say this is, I'll say a valid email address. And for the type, remember the reason why this is different from this is, remember I said whenever the value is true or false, it is going to be a Boolean. But whenever the value is a string like this, and it tells you in the documentation, if this is a string, then the type has to be a string too. So this just means the type means this is the type of value Terraform is expecting to get from here. So let's say the type was still a Boolean, right? Terraform will expect this to be true or false. So if it comes in here and it says this, it's going to throw up an error. So for the type that we want is a string. So we'll type string in here. And that's all we need to do to create our variable. So now we'll copy the variable name, then come to your SNS file. We are going to reference that variable. It is going to be double quotes, $, curly brackets, var, period. Then we are going to paste the variable name there. And this is all we need to do to create our SNS topic. I'm not going to run it just yet because since I have my RDS in there, it takes time. It would try to create all this. But someone was asking me last class Latif was asking me how, if you want to create just one particular resource, how do you do that? Well, I can probably do it with this SNS because it is not depending on anything. So let me save my files. I'll save it and I'll close this variable for now. So to just create a particular resource or delete a particular resource. So I'll come to my terminal. For this lecture, I'm not trying to create everything because it is going to take time. I'll run everything once I'm done creating the application load balancer. But for now, the SNS doesn't depend on anything, so I can create that one. So to create a particular resource, we'll use the same thing, Terraform, then apply. Then you use the target flag minus target space. This is what I was doing wrong in the last class. The syntax that I found online add an equal sign. That is wrong. It is a space. Then we'll copy the resource we are trying to create. So I only want to create this SNS topic. So I'll copy it, paste it here, and I'll remove the quote between them, add a period. And before I click apply, in the management console, I'll cancel here. Notice I only have one SNS topic. It is called billing. So I'll go back to my Terraform file. So I'll press enter. And okay. So I'm just reading what it says. Note that target option is not suitable for routine use and is only provided for exceptional situation. Okay, so maybe I can probably only use it to delete something. So I'll save it to the end, but that is the right syntax to do that. Yeah. So that is the right syntax. Once I'm done, once I create this resource, I will try to delete it. Then just targeting just that resource, and I'll show you. Anyway, so that is how we create our SNS topic. It's very simple. Just these two syntax. So let's create our application load balancer. So on the left side, right click, new file, create your application load balancer file. I'll call it alb.tf. So once you create your application load balancer file, it is going to open it. I'm going to put the reference file in the chat. So you can download the reference file and open it. So once you open the reference file, you should see this in there. Again, it is just 4 syntax and we'll be done with our application load balancer. The first syntax is going to create our application load balancer, right? And we are going to, this is just the syntax. The second one is the target group. Remember when you create your application load balancer, you create your target group. The third one is our listener. Since for our project, we are using 2 listeners on port 80 and port 443. So we are creating those 2 listeners. All right, so I'll copy all this resource, select them and copy it and come back to your application load balancer file and paste it there. So I'll close this reference file because I don't need it. And we'll start from the top. So the first thing we are going to do is, we are going to give our application load balancer a name. That is the first argument. So remember when you, again, just like in the management console, if you don't remember what argument you need, like I said, I always recommend coming here to the management console and come to load balancer, try to create one and see the type of option it is asking you. So I will click create load balancer. I want an HTTP, an application load balancer. Right, I'll select create. See, it is asking you for a name, the scheme, right? The IP address type, listener, the availability zones, all that stuff. That is pretty much exactly what we are entering here. Sometimes it wouldn't be in order, but it will be very close. So the first one is asking me for is my application load balancer name. So in double quote, I'll call it my application. Let me just put a dash load. Or you can call it my ALB. You don't have to make your name as long as mine. So that's the name. Then the next thing it is asking us is it going to be internet facing? Without even reading in the documentation, I already know what that is asking me because under the scheme here, it is asking you, is it internet facing or internal? So here it is asking you, is it internal, not internet? So here it is not, since it's not going to be internal, we are just going to type false. Because the Terraform doesn't give you the option to ask if it's internet. This is it there says internal. So you just, if you type true in here, it means it's going to be internal. And if you type false, it means it's going to be internet facing. So since I typed false, it means this is going to be internet facing. The load balancer type, right? The type we selected when we were creating our application load balancer is application. So here we are going to type application. Remember, before I create my load balancer, if I click cancel, create load balancer, it asks you select load balancer type. It is application load balancer. So the value Terraform is expecting is that application. And it tells you that in the Terraform documentation. So if you Google it, I'll just copy this to make it faster. And paste this here, press enter. All right. This time it is this one. So I'll select this one. Right. If I go to load balancer type, you can see it is telling you the type of load balancer to create. Possible values are application, gateway, or network. Those are all the other options you saw in the beginning. So like I also told you, the default, anytime you see optional here, it means that even if you don't use it, Terraform will work. But you have to understand that if you don't use it, Terraform assumes there's a value you are trying to create, because you still have to specify between any of these three. And it is telling you that if you don't put anything in there, the default value Terraform will use is this application. So let's say here, I didn't put anything under load balancer type. Terraform is going to assume I'm trying to use application. But let's say I'm trying to create a network. Well, Terraform is still going to use the application. So if I want to, that is why I put this here. It's just always good to specify what you are trying to do. So, and in case if someone else is reading your code, they know you are trying to, this syntax will create an application load balancer. All right. The next argument is security group. Security groups, right? And hints that I want to give you guys is when you see an S here, especially for something that says security group or IDs or something like that, it means that any value you put in here, it can be more than one. You see how we put in all this value here? Terraform only expects a single value there. But when you see security groups, you know how you can add multiple security groups to any of your resource is the same thing here, right? Terraform understands that your application load balancer can have multiple security groups. But in our case, we have only been using one security groups. But let's say you want to use 2 or 3, you can add as many security groups to it as you want. So here, it is expecting multiple values. So to list, and by list, I mean that is something you need to know. When I say list, like in coding, right, or in anything, remember, like a good example is when you go into the grocery store, you have a list. Your list has a bunch of things on it. You have apple, orange, whatever items you are trying to buy, you list them there. It's the same thing here, right? But how you tell Terraform you are trying to list something is you use this bracket. So when you use this bracket, it knows that you are trying to list as many things in it. So the security group we want to put in it is our application load balancer security group. So I'll come to the security group file, right? Then let's look for the application load balancer security group. I think it's the first one. Yes, it is the first one we create. Remember to reference any resources attributes, you copy the resource type and the local name, copy it. Come back to your application load balancer file. I'll paste it in those brackets, right? Then we'll remove this, add a period, go all the way to the end. We are trying to reference those security groups ID. So we'll type .id and click out. And that's all we need to do here. Then the next thing we are going to do is we are going to specify the subnets that we want to put our application load balancer in. So if I go back to the management console, you can see down here, we specify our subnets, right? Here you will select your VPC, then you pick your subnets. It is the same thing we are doing in Terraform. According to our reference architecture, let me see if I can find it. According to our reference architecture, remember our application load balancer would have a reach to the public subnet 1 and public subnet 2. So for our subnet ID, we need to be referencing public subnet 1 and public subnet 2. So for this particular one, Terraform doesn't, the way the structure is you can't, I guess, well, at least when I was looking at it, this is the option I choose to enter it separately. You would expect that you can list it something like this. Maybe you say subnet ID and list it like this, but this is how Terraform specified it. So I like this method, so I'll just use this one. So the first subnet we want to reference is our public subnet 1. We'll come to our VPC file. Let's look for the syntax for our public subnet 1. You can see it here, right? I'm going to copy the resource type and the local name. Copy it. Come back to the application load balancer file, paste it there. Remove the double quotes between them. Add a period, come all the way to the end, add another period and type ID. So that is how we reference the public subnet 1. We are going to do exactly the same for public subnet 2. If you don't remember, one thing I noticed is sometimes you guys try to type it out. That is fine. But copy pasting is also very good, because even if you spell something wrong and you copy paste it, it would always be the same thing, but it will just probably be wrong, right? But let's say you are trying to reference your public subnet 1, you typed it a different value and you think you won't remember what you typed it and you just start typing it out here and you typed it in a different name, then it is not going to work. The same thing happens when you are referencing your variable. Whatever name you call your variable name, when you are referencing it in any file where you are referencing it, they need to be the same exact name. So here we are going to reference our public subnet 2. My method is I'll just go to the VPC, and this is like muscle memory. It also helps me remember which value I'm supposed to be referencing. So if you can come from here, right? If you can come from here and understand that you need to come here and you need to come under public subnet 2, and you understand which value you need, which is your resource type and the local name, right? Copy it. And you come back to your application load balancer file, paste it there, remove the double quotes, add a period, and come all the way to the end, add another period and type ID. Then you pretty much have a good understanding of what you need to be doing. So this is kind of like what I'm expecting you guys to do. Copy and pasting is very fine because it also proves that you know what you are supposed to be copying. For this value, I can just come and copy this and put it down here. If you can copy the public subnet 2 ID here, then that lets me understand that you know exactly what you are doing. So the next argument we are going to enter here is the enable deletion protection. So that is, I believe it is here somewhere. It is an option that is available in the application load balancer. This similar to what you have in the EC2, where you can prevent someone from accidentally deleting your application load balancer. So that is what this argument is for. So for now, since we are testing things out, we're going to type this as false. We don't want to enable that feature, but I add this value here, this argument here, just to show you that it is in Terraform. And the last thing we are going to enter for this syntax is our tag name. Remember, we are using the name value and the name key and the value we are going to give it. You can call it anything. So I'll tag it application load balancer. And that's all we need to do to create the syntax. The next one is, the next syntax we are going to create is our target group, right? Let's say here I entered all this. I'm just going to enter whatever. Here I've select my subnet and I click next to security group. Ignore that, click next. I'll just select a security group. We've done that. Here is where we create our target group. So however, whatever step you are using to create any resource in the management console, what I do is I just follow the same step. The first time I open Terraform, really, I don't know what I'm supposed to be creating. But when I come in here and I see the type of values that I'm entering in here, then I'll go into the Terraform documentation and look for the same arguments for that resource. So here, we are going to create our target group. Remember, if you want to find the syntax, just type this in Google or type a descriptive name of it. Type Terraform AWS, how to create a target group or create target group. It will take you to the syntax. This is the resource type. And one thing I want you guys to also know is what each of this is called. This is a resource type because sometimes when you type something wrong, right? And Terraform is telling you the resource type doesn't exist. So that way you already know, okay, it's refined to my resource type. This is called a local name, like local, right? These are called arguments. You know, your arguments will have a value. And when we reference something here, let's say for here, we are referencing our public subnet 2 and something in the public subnet 2. We are referencing the ID. The ID is called an attribute. So please understand those names. Remember resource type, local name, arguments. You have the values of those arguments. And if you are referencing something in any resource, you are referencing the attributes. Okay. For our target group, the first thing we are going to enter is our target group name. We are going to give it a name. So for this, I can call it my servers, my web servers. And for the target type, right, in the management console, we give it a name. Target type, we want an EC2 instance. So here, we are going to type instance. And mind you, I didn't type instance here because I saw instance here, right? I mean, in this case, it is instance, and that's what we are trying to reference. But what I'm trying to say is Terraform will tell you exactly what values to enter for that resource type. So if I copy this now, copy it and paste it in Google, or you can search it. And I go to the syntax, right? Which one was it again? Let me see. I can't remember. Let me see. So for my target type, so under this argument, I'll look for target type, right? Target type. Look at it. You just read this. Terraform is telling you anything you see in the red, those are the value it is going to accept. So we have instance, IP, and Lambda. It is the same thing as what you see here. But what I'm trying to say is don't assume that whatever value you see in here is what Terraform is going to accept. Go in the Terraform documentation and see, because in Terraform, for some resource, it could be slightly called something different. It could be, but I'm just saying whatever you see here, don't verify that in Terraform, it is called the same thing. All right.
Quick question is this. Sorry to...
Yes.
But the section where you put the name, why did we choose my web server? Is that just where you want to work on? Or like you have my web server on the name. Is that the target group you want to work on? Or it's just, does it always have to be my web servers?
It can be anything.
Anything.
It can be anything. Yes. So for any arguments where you see name, tag, and description, those can be anything. Just like if you come in here on that name, you can type anything in here. Right? This is what that particular argument where the name where I type my web server. So assume in here, I'm typing my web server in here. So when you see name, description, and tag name, you can type anything you want in there.
Okay.
So as long you are following the format that the name will accept, you know. So like here, it is saying you can have a maximum of 32 alphanumeric character or hyphens, but cannot begin or end with an hyphen. So as long as you are following the rules of what the name will accept, you can type anything in there for your name.
Thanks.
All right, no problem. And the ports, all right. Again, if you don't visually, you can see port here. It is port 80. The protocol is HTTP. So here, port, we are going to type 80. Protocol, it is HTTP. So in double quotes, HTTP. Make sure it is all capital letters, HTTP. Then this is the VPC we want to create our application load balancer in under the VPC ID argument, right? So the knowledge or the method of solution that I want you guys to follow, which also proves to me that you are understanding it. Well, you don't have to prove it to me. I don't mean to sound, but prove to yourself. That's how you can gauge. I guess I should say it this way. How you can gauge if you are understanding it is asking you for a VPC ID, meaning that which VPC is this target group going to be created in, right? So what you would do is I'll come to the VPC file, right? Because this is where my VPC is. I'll look for the VPC. This is the VPC that I want to put it in. To reference the VPC, right? Remember, you copy the ID, the resource type and the local name, copy it. Then come back to the application load balancer file. Under VPC, the attribute we are referencing is the ID. So I'll paste that there first. I'll remove the quotes between them, add a period, come all the way to the end, add another period and type ID, because this is asking for an ID argument. It is asking for an ID attribute. Then the next thing here is the health check, right? In the management console, right? These are the health check. If you click on advanced, these are all the values that goes with the health check we've been using. So actually, when I did this, all I did is I know I'm kind of contradicting myself now. I just told you guys, don't assume whatever the value is in your management console and type that in your Terraform file. Well, that is true for the most part, but for this one, obviously this works just like the name. You can enter a number in here. Obviously, this number is from 2 to 10. This number is from 2 to 10. This is from 2 to 120. This is from 5 to 300 and 200 to 299. So that means like, no, that one's just giving you an example, but it's an example, but you can type any number in here. So for me, what I did is these are the default value, default number that I always hear. Remember, we never come in here and change anything. So I just use the same default value in my code, right? So, and if you read in Terraform, it will tell you to, but it does, because you can adjust it to whatever you want. So Terraform is not going to tell you type 5 in there, because you can put any number in there. So under healthy threshold, right? If you look in the management console, healthy threshold, the value there now is 5. So I just came in my Terraform file and put 5 in there. The interval is 30, right? So here, interval 30. Then the matcher here. What the matcher is referring to is the success code. So that's why I say sometimes it could be different in Terraform. Terraform calls it matcher, but it is referring to the success code. So here we are going to put, for the matcher, we are going to put in double quotes 200, comma 302. That's the one we were using for our project. So we want these two success code, 200, 302. The path, right, in double quotes, we are going to, and this /. Again, if you look in the management console, right there on that part. Then the port, right? We are going to call the port traffic port. So here, traffic dash port. So make sure you spell it exactly correctly. So if I look in here, you can see port, you have traffic port and you have override. So here we type traffic dash port. The protocol, it is going to be HTTP. The timeout is going to be 2. The unhealthy threshold is going, no, sorry, the timeout is going to be 5. And the unhealthy threshold is going to be 2. Any of this number would work, but these are just the default number I used. And I believe that's the default number here. The timeout is 5. The unhealthy threshold is 2.
Labi,
so yes.
Why are some of the numeric values are you put some in quote and some other not in quote? Any?
There isn't any. So obvious, this number, usually when it is a single number, you can leave it like this. But since these are two number, it becomes a string. So that's why we have to put it in a quote. And I think in Terraform documentation too, again, I always just follow whatever format they are using. So for matcher, right, you can see how they, for example, this is how they said to specify it.
So regardless
So
of quote or no quote, the system will still reach that value.
yes.
Okay.
Yes. But for this particular one, always reference Terraform. However, Terraform says to list it, that's how you have to. So the Terraform documentation is very good. For if you look under their example, right, I'll always come here. This is just how I do it. I'll come here. I can see some examples here and I can see port. They didn't put it in the code. So for those ones, I'll do it the same way, you know. Then for other ones, like that one I just showed you here under matcher, where is it? Matcher, okay. Why am I missing it now? I just saw it. Well, somewhere in here. I don't know why my eyes is playing tricks on me now. Anyway, wherever I just showed you that 200 versus, why can't I see it now? Am I referencing? Well, that was weird. Anyway, it's somewhere in here. Maybe I'm just not scrolling down. Oh, it's down here. Sorry. It's down here. Matcha right here.
Okay.
So here it is. They are specifying it this way. So I just put it this way.
Okay.
And sometimes if you run it, Terraform will give you an error. It'll tell you what the value you enter is not the right format. Then you'll know, okay, I need to put it in a quote.
Okay.
But most likely if it's a single number, you just type it.
Okay.
All right. So that is that for that. We are done with our target group. Now is when we need to create our listener. So similar to your management console, right? Let's say you enter all this value. I give this a name. Click next. Here is where you specify your targets, but I don't have any target now, right? But obviously we've passed the listener for our application load balancer was in the first step right here. This is where we create a listener right there. The HTTP was there, but we could have added another one, HTTPS. So this is where we create our listener. And that is exactly what we are doing here. So to help you, if you want to put your listener up here after you create your application load balancer, let's say after the syntax, you want to put your listener there, it's fine. And there is no right or wrong in how you organize them. So you can put them anywhere you want. By putting it, I mean this whole syntax, right? From line 45 to 63, I can come up here and put it between this syntax between 22 and 24. I don't mean put it in here anyway. You have to put it by itself on that another syntax. That is fine. So for our listener, the first listener we are creating is port 80 listener. So in our Terraform file, right? This is going to be for our listener, right? This is going to be the load balancer our listener is in. Well, we just created our application load balancer up here. So we are going to copy the resource type and the local name. Oh, no, sorry. This whole thing. Copy it. Then we are going to come there, paste it here, remove the quote between them, add a period. And remember, the attribute we are referencing is the ARN. So here, we are going to type .ARN. The port is 80. So here, we can type 80. But let me make sure. So I'll go to the Terraform documentation, port, health check. Okay, this is the health check. Port. Just trying to see something. Okay, let me go here. All right, so I was under the wrong resource, obviously. Okay, that makes sense. So to reference my listener, because Terraform has like different things, so I'll just do Terraform AWS create listener. I was referencing the wrong documentation. So I'll paste that in Google, enter, right? Come here, and I'll just look at how they reference theirs. So here you can see for their port here, they are putting it in quotes. So I'll just do whatever they do. So here they are putting it in quotes. So I need to figure out if it really does matter or not. Just to practice, you can not put it in quote for this particular one and see if it works. The worst thing that will happen is it will tell you, oh, I won't accept it this way. Since theirs is in quote, I'll say put this in quotes. Then for the protocol, that is HTTP in double quotes, HTTP. And it is all capital letters. The default action. Remember when we created our application load balancer? You can't see it here, but after you've created your application load balancer, remember our port 80 is directing traffic? No, remember our port 80 is redirecting traffic to port 443. Remember when I showed you guys that website and they have port 80, their site is accessible on port 80 and it's saying unsecure. And I told you guys it's because they forgot to redirect it. So that is the same thing we are doing in our Terraform file. Our default action, and once we create it, I will show you. So our default action type will be redirect. So in here, type redirect. So D-I-R-E-C-T. So redirect. And where did I get this from? Terraform documentation. And I keep going back and forth to show you the documentation is very detailed and helpful. So if I look for default actions right here, right? Well, it doesn't tell me here. So this is one of those things you just have to, this one I might have referenced someone else's code online, right? Or I just know it's redirect. So I just type redirect in there. So for this one, it doesn't, okay, it does tell you detail below, require default action, detail below. Oh, it does give you, yeah, never mind. I didn't reference, is here. So you can say type, the type of actions you can have for your, the type of action you can have for your listener. You can see forward, redirect, fixed response, authenticate cognito, and so on. So I use the redirect because that's the one I want. All right. So then under your redirect action, right? This one, I reference what I did in the management console. Because remember when you redirect, right? It has all this little thing it started that it created for you automatically. I'll show you once we created it. So when I did, no, I'll show you once we created, excuse me. So once I created this in the management console, I looked at the type of configuration that was there, and that is what I typed in here. But this is in the management console too, is in the Terraform documentation too. For that type, right, you can see, I know it's somewhere in here. Okay, so if I did, let me see the code again. So host pattern, the redirect, right? It's somewhere in here, but I just don't want to spend too much time. Default action. I'm just trying to show you the arguments you need. They are in here somewhere. So this is forward. Oh, okay, redirect is down here. So you can see this redirect, right, is referring to this. Then once you put that there, right, then you have to reference the argument that redirect us. So the following arguments are required. So you have status code required, host is optional. So all these other ones are optional. And if you look, these values that are here, those are the arguments I used here. But this is based on what I saw in the management console. So sometimes that's why I said sometimes it's better to create it first so you see what you need. So here for host, I'm going to enter, this is the value that would be in the management console. So it goes like this, double quote, the hashtag symbol, curly bracket, and type host in there. So that's what that looks like. And I knew this is what I need here because when I created in the management console, this is what it looks like. So for path, we'll do this double quote, / hashtag, curly bracket, we'll type path in there. So we'll type it exactly like this. The port is going to be 443 because that is the port we are redirecting it to, 443. The protocol is going to be HTTPS, all caps HTTPS. And the status code is going to be in double quotes again, HTTP_301. And that is what that looks like. Please give me a second. All right, sorry, I'm back. Okay, so this is how we create our port 80 HTTP listener. I'm going to show you in the management console these values that we put in here. So the last one we are going to enter is our HTTPS listener. Again, for the load balancer ARN, which application load balancer are we creating this listener for? Well, it is the application load balancer we created up there, up here. So you can copy the resource type and the local name, come down, and under load balancer, paste it there. Remove the quote, add a period, come all the way to the end, add another period and type ID. Then the port, right? Which port is this operating on? If you look in the management console, load balancer, the port, it is going to be 443. So in here, double quote, 443. The protocol is going to be HTTPS, double quotes, all capital letter HTTPS. I left this here for you because this SSL policy is always the same. And it looks like this. Certificate ARN. Remember when we created our HTTPS listener, then there was an option there to upload the ARN of our certificate. We didn't have to upload it. We just have to click the drop down and select our SSL certificate, right? So that is what this is asking for here, because remember, port 443 is how you secure traffic to your website. And to secure that traffic, you upload your SSL certificate on that listener. You add it to that listener, and that is what we have to do here. So rather than putting the ARN of our SSL certificate here, let's create a variable for it. So we are going to come to our variable file. I'll copy this variable, come down, paste it there, right? Then we are just going to modify the values. So we'll remove this in double quotes. Let's call it SSL certificate ARN. So I'll call it SSL certificate ARN. The default value, right? The default value is when Terraform is creating your application load balancer, the listener on port 443, it is creating all these arguments. When it gets to this certificate ARN, it is what we are saying is Terraform is going to come to the variable file. We haven't referenced it yet. It's going to come to the variable file, and whatever default value we put here is what Terraform is going to use. And another thing I forgot to mention is, I know for our variable, we've been putting a default value here, right? So let's say we actually don't put any default value here, because you can do that too. For example, I cannot put any default value here. You know what is going to happen? When you run your thing and Terraform is creating your resources, when it gets to the point where it wants to create the particular resource you are referencing, right? When it comes here and it doesn't see a default value, it would ask you to type that default value in your terminal.
And
You know how in your terminal?
Oh, Aziz,
Yeah.
you have your certificate as S. Sorry, I was waiting for you, but
Yeah. You said is what?
you have your certificate as S, not C.
Oh, yeah. Thank
If
you.
you misspell something at the variable, definitely will affect it, right?
No, it won't.
It
See,
won't.
this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm saying. Yes, because this is just the name I'm giving my variable. So let's say I spelled it wrong here, right? But then when I go to reference it here, right? And I actually spell it right here, right?
Yeah.
I put a C here. It will be different from my variable name, and that will be wrong.
Okay.
But what I'm trying to say is that let's say I spelled it wrong here. This is the exact name I have to reference when I reference it in my application load balancer.
Okay.
Because remember when we created here, right? When we created in the variable, for example, let's say I was done, then I have to come and reference it in my application load balancer file. And how I will reference it is double quotes, $, curly brackets, var, period. So now let's say I typed SSL dot, what was that? Dash certificate dash what was it? ARN. Right? See, I'm guessing what I think I called it. That's why I always tell you guys, don't type it. So this will be wrong because when Terraform is creating this resource, it gets to this certificate ARN, it is going to say, oh yeah, you create a variable called SSL certificate ARN that I should reference to find what I'm supposed to put in here. So what it will do is it will come to that variable file. Then it won't find anything that is named SSL certificate because obviously I spelled it wrong here with an S. So even though I spelled it wrong here, what I'm trying to say is I just have to be consistent with the name. So that's why when I create my variable, what I do is I copy everything. So I'll copy the name. Obviously, I'll spell it right now. So that one is wrong. I'll copy this. Then I'll come here and I'll paste it there. Like let's say I was creating this and I did var right up to that point. I'll just paste it. That's why I use the copy and paste to make sure it is the same. So, but my variable, I wasn't done with it yet. So So what I was saying is, let's say I don't have a default value in here. This will still work. So what will happen is when we create this resource, we say Terraform apply. When Terraform is now creating the resource, when it gets to this part where it needs the ARN of our SSL certificate, I have to manually type that value in the terminal. You know how you type yes? Once it gets to this part, it will ask you the question, what is the ARN of your SSL certificate? Then you will have to type it in. To save us, look at all the variables we have here. To save us from having to type all this, and in at work, you can have hundreds of variables. You won't be typing everything one by one in the terminal when you are creating your resource. So to save us from all that work of typing it in, that's why we put the default argument. So the default just means that whatever we have there is what Terraform will use. Do you guys understand? So here, I'm just going to type default, right? Then obviously I want to get the ARN of my SSL certificate. So come to your management console, open a new tab, then type ACM up here. I think it's, yeah, ACM, select certificate manager, right? You should already have, we remember we created a domain name and we created an SSL certificate for it. So once you type ACM, you should see your domain name and your SSL certificate status should be issued. Select this drop down and come down here under ARN, copy this. Then come back to your Terraform file. Under the variable file, under that default for your SSL certificate ARN, paste it between those two quotes. So it should look like this. Then for the description, it would be, we can call it SSL certificate ARN. And the type is going to be a string. So remember what I said. This is our variable, we are done. So once what I do is I create the variable. Once I'm done, I'll copy the variable name. Then I come to my application load balancer file. This is where I want to reference this variable. So how you reference a variable is double quotes, $, curly bracket, var, dot the variable name. Again, what that means is when Terraform is creating this, when it gets to this part, right, it needs a value. Had it been, we can copy this. We can copy this and put it here like this. And it is still going to work. Obviously, you put it in double quotes. It is still going to work. But what I'm saying is for certain values, we don't want to put them directly in our code because let's say this was actually confidential information. You share your code with someone, then the person would be able to see your value. But when you are sharing your code with someone, you share everything with them, but you won't share your variable with them. You share all the files without the variable file. So that's what I'm saying. So this is what the variable does. So the value we could have typed in there, we are telling Terraform to go and reference it in the variable file. And how Terraform knows where to go is the exact name. The name we put here is the same exact name we put here. So that's that. I know I can't spend too long on that, but I just want you guys to understand the variable. And the last thing we need to do now to finish our
Sorry to cut you off, please.
Yeah.
I kind of missed something, the way you got that variable, the code from the ACM that you put on the variable.
All right. So you come to the management console.
Do that again. Okay.
you type ACM. This is something you should have created from the last project. So if you didn't complete those last project, you're not going to see it there. So
Let's
type
see.
ACM, select certificate manager.
Got you.
Then in here, you should see something in there.
Okay, I didn't do it. I see. No wonder, because that was what
Yeah.
confused me. Okay.
Yeah. So for now, how you can finish this project is you can just remove your code, right? This is what you do. So for all this code, put this hash sign in front of them.
Okay.
You can still write them to complete them, but put the hash sign next to all of them, right? So this just means, I think you can try putting it in front of the resource like this.
Okay.
And let's see and run it because what Terraform will do is Terraform will ignore it. Okay. So you want to ignore it, but you can still write it out. So when you finish those projects and you are ready to put in your SSL ARN, then you can just remove the hash sign. But once you put that symbol, Terraform is going to ignore this syntax. Okay. But you will still be able to run it and create the rest.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So the default action type, remember for our port 443 listener, that one is the one that is going to be forwarding our traffic to our target groups, right? The web servers in our target group. So for the default action, the type is going to be forward, just what I just showed you guys in the Terraform documentation. So in here, we'll type forward. And the target group ARN, you can see it is saying target group ARN, right? We created our target group up here. And created our target group here. So I'll copy the resource type and the local name. Copy, come down, paste it. Then we are going to remove the double quotes, add a period, come all the way to the end, add another period. Remember, the attribute we are referencing is the ARN. So here, and type ARN. And that is all we need to do. We are done with our application load balancer. So this is how you create an application load balancer in Terraform that has an HTTP and HTTPS listener. If you have to do this at work or anywhere, just come and reference this. So what I'll do now is save my file, select file. I'll select save all. Let me just make sure I have everything. Yeah. I'll select save all. Then once you've saved your file, we can now run our Terraform apply. Open the terminal, select terminal, new terminal. Here we are going to type Terraform. Apply. Press enter. So remember, before Terraform creates your resource, it will show you the plan. The plan means that it is telling you, I'm going to create all this resource in your AWS account. It is going to create 33 resources. It is not going to change anything you already have in your account. And it is not going to delete anything because you can see those ones are 0. And if you want to see the resource that Terraform will create, it is telling you here, it will create a VPC here. And the VPC will have all these values. It will create a subnet, public subnet too. They will have all these values and so on. So you just review this. Once you are fine, come down and type yes. Because it is asking you, do you want to perform these actions? Type yes and press enter. So now Terraform is creating all the resources in my AWS account. It might take a while because I'm creating the database again. Database takes forever to create. So we just give it some time. In the meantime, I can answer any question that anyone has. Are you guys able to follow along with this one? This one is actually a fun code to write. So everything we are doing is leading towards, at the end, we only have 2 more codes to write for the auto scaling group and Route 53. Then you should be able to see your website, right? So, and you will see once we are done, the project that took us about two weeks to do, right? The only work we have to do is write this code now. Once this code is written, right, we can create our whole website in less than 15 minutes. Obviously, this only takes time because it is creating the resources in my AWS account now, right? So we can see right now it is creating the NAT gateway one. So it says still creating. And when I go to the management console, I'll try to catch it. So if I select VPC and I select NAT gateway, see, it's still pending. It's creating NAT gateway. What I'm trying to say is anything you are doing in Terraform, see, Terraform is doing what you would have done otherwise. So when you were clicking in things in management console and creating stuff, Terraform is pretty much doing the same thing. It has to create your VPC. It has to create your subnets. So Terraform will not just start creating auto scaling group, or no, it won't start creating the application load balancer before it creates the VPC because it knows the application load balancer goes in the VPC. So that's what I'm saying. If you apply a high level concept to this thing, which is why we walk through the management console with 4 different projects, because everything you are doing in the management console, that is exactly what Terraform is doing for you now. So you can see where I showed you, it is creating the NAT gateway. And once it is done with that, it is done creating the NAT gateway, it will move on to the next thing it needs to create that is probably depending on the NAT gateway. So if there's anything that was depending on the NAT gateway, first it will create the NAT gateway before it starts creating the other thing. Another one we can check is the RDS because that takes longer. So if I go to the RDS console, you can see I have one RDS instance and it is still creating it, right? So the main thing we did today, is our SNS. So let's review that. So here you can type SNS up here. You can see before I had one topic, now you can see I have 2. Look at my topic. It is update topic. That is what the name I gave it. Let me show you that in my Terraform file. So my Terraform file SNS, look at my topic here. The name I gave it is update topic. So it has already created that in my account. So again, for that topic, right, we subscribe for that topic, we subscribe to it with an email. Remember what I said, a variable for the endpoint. Endpoint means the email we want to be notified on. But instead of typing the email here, I told you guys to put the email in a variable file. We put the email in a variable file down here, right here, right? We called it endpoint email. And if I go back to my SNS, right? Endpoint email. So let me show you in my account. So this topic that I created, update topic, I'll click on it. Under subscription, right? You can see right here, it has my endpoint email. Under endpoint, you can see the email that I put there. Now it is saying pending confirmation because I have to go. Remember when you create your Terraform thing, I'm glad I saw this. Now when you go to your Terraform thing, once you create it, you have to go in your email to verify it. So I'll just go in my email. I should have like an email from Amazon. You can see it is right here. And now all I have to do is click confirm subscription. Let me click it. And you can see subscription confirmed. Now, if I go back to my SNS topic, and I'm just going to refresh, you can see it says confirmed. So that's the topic we created in Terraform. It is here in our management console. All right, the other thing we created was our application load balancer. So I'm going to go to EC2, come down to load balancer. The application load balancer will be there because it is not depending on the RDS. You can see the name I gave it is my application load balancer. In my Terraform file, under my application load balancer, you can see my application load balancer's name is my application load balancer. Let's check our listener. So all this different, you can see the VPC it is in. It is in my fleet card VPC. You can see the subnet. It should be public subnet 1. So I'm right clicking to open it in a new tab. It is public subnet 1, and the other one should be public subnet 2. Public subnet 2. The next thing we did is we can check our listener, right? You can see we have 2 listeners, one on port 80, the other on port 443. Look at the rule that I was telling you about. So for this part, I necessarily didn't understand it. But what I did is once I created it in the management console, I looked here and whatever this value is, right? That is what I was telling you that I used in my code. So if I come down here, right, you can see host, path, port, HTTPS, and HTTP_301. In the management console, you can see the same thing here. So, and for our HTTPS listener, it is port 443. You can see the security policy here. And it is, we are using an SSL certificate. You can see the SSL certificate here. The one that I put under my port 443 listener here. And that one is forwarding traffic to our target group that I called my web server. You can see the target group name here, my web server. If I come back up here, under my target group, I gave it a name, my web servers. Well, good. It is now finished creating my creating all my resource. So then the last thing we need to check is our target group. So I'll go to target group. I should have a target group called my web server. You can see it's on port 80, but right now I shouldn't have any targets in it. You can see all the under the health check monitoring. Look at where I put that 200 in quotes with the 302. You can see that it still entered it correctly. You can see the path, 5 seconds, all those things we specified here. all those things we specified here, those are the things you are seeing here. So everything looks good. I've created my application load balancer and my SNS topic. Everything is good. So now let's test what I said about deleting a particular resource. So let me try to delete my application load balancer. So to delete, let's say I don't want to delete everything here. I only just want to delete my application load balancer. So remember I said we'll type Terraform. Destroy. Then we will use the target flag. It is minus target space. And the resource I'm trying to delete is my application load balancer. So I'll copy the resource type and the local name. Copy, I'll paste it here. And I'll just come here, I'll do the same thing. I'm going to remove the double quotes there and add a period between them. So I'll press enter. So there you go. It has run it right. It is telling me that my application load balancer, because I'm deleting my application load balancer, obviously my application load balancer has some things that are depending on it, and it is going to delete those as well. So it's telling me it is going to delete my application load balancer resource. It is going to delete the listener, right? And it is going to also delete the listener with the SSL certificate. So pretty much it is going to delete my two listeners, and it's telling me right here, I will delete 3 of this resource. Then if I'm fine with it, right, I'm just going to type yes, delete it. And there you go, destroy complete. It has deleted my application load balancer. So if I go back to the management console, I'm going to go to load balancers. You can see I don't have anything there, but I still have my VPC. So let me see. See, I still have my target group that I created. Let me go to VPC. I still have my VPC, and let me show you guys one more RDS. So let me just select it here, RDS. And there you go. I still have the RDS. So that is how you delete a particular resource. But you have to also understand how this resource dependency works. For example, I can just go there and say Terraform destroy minus target VPC and delete my VPC. I won't be able to delete the VPC because there are other resources in the VPC. So as long as there isn't any resource that is relying on another resource, you should be able to delete it. But let's say the resource you are trying to delete, other resources are depending on it, then you won't be able to delete it. So that's just the same rule in the management console. In the management console, I can't delete my VPC until I've deleted every resource that I created in the VPC. So that's just the same rule. So here we are done. Everything is working as planned. So now I'm just going to delete everything in my environment. I'll just type Terraform, destroy, press enter. So the first thing it is going to do is show you the plan. then type yes. And now Terraform is going to delete everything in my account. So it's deleting my route tables and all those stuff. So if I refresh here, you should see that it is deleting my RDS instance. And it will wait till all that is done. Then it would, let me cancel here. My target group should be gone. So from here, Terraform is just going to delete everything in my account until it's done. Do you guys have any question? Okay, so that is it for class. I'm going to post the video tonight. And sorry I've been late on some of the videos. It's just the time it is taking to render it. So I'll try to post this one tonight, and make sure you catch up with all your work. The main thing you should do is this weekend is try to catch up with your Terraform file, your Terraform project. Make sure you have all these files we've created so far. And also, if you don't have the reference, the two reference thing we need from the last project, the Fleetcat AMI that we created, and the snapshot for your RDS instance. So, I mean, you should walk that project all the way to the end. You don't have to even create the auto scaling group. Create it up to the part where you upload your SSL certificate and you update your domain name and all that stuff. So once you've done that, then you're done at that point. Start deleting everything in your account, but make sure before you delete it, create an AMI of your EC2 instance and create a snapshot of your RDS instance when you are deleting it. That's the two main things you need. And when you are walking through it, if you need help, just let me know, or you have any question. All right. Thank you, guys. Since you guys don't have any question, thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, Aziz.
And yeah, I'll see you guys on Monday.
See ya.
Take care, Aslavi.
All right.
Bye.
No problem. Bye.
All right, good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Bye.
Good night.
Good night. Bye. Good night.